Thanks, Mike. Welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Fillmore, and welcome to In Conversation, Remember the Future with Brendan Fernandes. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are here at the AGNS in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik people first signed with the British Crown in 1725. These treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between the nations. Brendan Fernandes is on the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. These lands are also home to the Miami, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Sac, Fox, and others. Chicago has long been a center for Indigenous people to gather, trade, and maintain kinship ties. Today, the lands are home to one of the largest urban Indigenous communities in the United States. Members of this community continue to contribute to the life of the city, celebrate their heritage, and practice traditions, care for the land and the water there. So welcome to In Conversation, presented by our generous sponsors, TD Bank Groups, with an internationally recognized Canadian artist, Brendan Fernandes. He's a multidisciplinary artist who centers his practice in dance. And forgive me, this is a bit of a long intro and a long bio, and Brendan deserves every moment of this, but it is not a short one, so bear with me. Addressing the anxieties of today through his work, Fernandes looks to dance to find a way of creating safe space and collective solidarity. Brendan Fernandes was born at a young age, just kidding, in 1979 in Nairobi, Kenya. He's an internationally recognized artist working at the intersection of dance and visual arts. He's currently based in Chicago, as we heard, and his projects address issues of race, queer culture, migration, protest, and other forms of collective movement. Always looking to create agency, Brendan's projects take on hybrid forms, part ballet, part queer dance hall, part political protest, always rooted in collaboration and fostering solidarity. He's a graduate of the Whitney Independent Study Program. He's a recipient of a Robert Rauschenberg Fellowship, and in 2010, when I met him, he was shortlisted for the Sobey Art Award. He's the recipient of the prestigious 2017 Canada Council New Chapters Grant. He's the recipient of a Smithsonian Artist Research Fellowship, and he's had projects shown at the 2019 Whitney Biennial, in the Guggenheim Museum, at the MoMA, at the Getty in LA. It's a lot, Brendan. It's been a busy couple of years. He has many projects that are coming, and I'll let you speak about those, but he's also shown at the National Gallery of Canada, at the Musée d'Art Contemporain Montréal, and his work is, proudly I might say, in many collections, including the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia. He's represented by Monique Meloche Gallery in Chicago, and he's currently artist in residence and faculty at Northwestern University. So without further ado, Mr. Fernandes, I'd like to welcome you and start the conversation by saying we sit here, those of you who are watching at home or on the beach in your car, hopefully not driving, or wherever you might be. What you can't see is that I'm sitting in a gallery space at the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, and Brendan is sitting in his space in Chicago, though we both share a virtual backdrop. How about you introduce this backdrop, Brendan? And we'll start there.
First and foremost, thank you so much. It means so much to be in conversation with you. We've known each other since 2010, but also Halifax and the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia has been such important space, community for me. So again, I'm grateful to be here with you all. And I'm excited about this. Yeah, we are in different places right now. And I think right now, gathering is something that is really challenging. I personally am a very social person, but my work deals with the idea of bringing people together. And so we're in different spaces, but I've been thinking a lot about virtual space and how do we feel togetherness in a virtual space. And so something I've been doing a lot now in some of my projects is creating filters and backgrounds and allowing people to feel like we're together, like, this kind of melding of this filter, which is a drawing from an upcoming piece that I'll talk a little bit about, where I've been thinking about the collectivity of bodies through noise, but also visual noise as a form of protective measures. But I feel like right now, we're two different places, but we're also in the same space. So how is a virtual space considered a safe space? So thanks for letting us be together in this way as well.
It's one of the strange mixed blessings of this pandemic has been finding ways to be together even though we're not together. We have the chance to discover a closeness through this virtual platform. And one of the beautiful things that this conversation series has offered us, and given us a chance to do is give voice and give us a shared platform to express solidarity and bring the things that you're passionate about to a bigger audience, to maybe a closer audience for us. So it's an interesting way of working our way through something that has been challenging in many ways, this virtual platform, but ultimately offers us this really resilient kind of new way of working.
Yeah, and I think that, we have to be resilient. We have to find new ways, right? And I think in a lot of my work, I'm questioning the ways of breaking down hegemonies, breaking down etiquettes, rules, so a decolonizing space through challenging what we have created, the structures, the systems, but creating newness within them. So for me, it's not fully dismantling, but it's about creating a newness from within that. And I think that, what we've been going through is a challenge of how do we respond? How do we gather? How do we collectively just even create intimacy? And so I think a lot about new ways to do that. And I'm still thinking it through. This process has definitely affected me, or this pandemic. And what does it mean to make dance in this moment? What does it mean to have bodies to gather and to touch and to be in this kind of solidarity? Because for me, when in a lot of my works, my audience is just as much a participatory activist in it. But I think about how right now we can't even be in the same room together. And so there was a moment in this pandemic when I was like, do I have an art practice anymore? Can I still make dances? Because sometimes critical mass, I gather, thousands of people to come together to dance. And so I've really been thinking through that kind of political action of gathering, and what does that mean? How do we kind of create, that moment of power? Because for me, the moment of power is when we have people coming together to deliver something, and now we have to do it in different spaces. So, and I'm finding that there is still action. There's still a positive space to kind of create voice. And I think even this way that we're now here together is a way, like we are together. We are gathering. There's other people watching and listening to us, and that creates a dynamic of exchange that is different from how I used to do it. But I'm also allowing this difference to take on a life and a power in my practice.
Let's go there for a minute, and let's talk about gathering and about dance. And you and I share, you much more seriously than I, but share that background in dance. And it's one of the things that really cleaves me to you. And I've really long admired your outspoken advocacy for artists, for dance, for labor, for the work that goes into making work and performing. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how that background in dance informs the work that you find yourself doing now, and maybe specifically how you have been affected by big big shake and political change in through dance, and how that has expressed itself, how you revisit moments and how you find your way through those moments.
Definitely. I'm a former ballet dancer. When my family emigrated to Canada, I started to dance more as a way. It was a form of, me being taken care of after because they were working, a new immigrant family, and they had a free dance class they put me in. And initially I just got more and more involved, and, became, started taking more classes. And I really found community in dance, which is interesting because we are such a community. We're such a tight community, almost too tight, where sometimes, especially in ballet, you can't infiltrate it. Like, it's a very strange culture. And so I started thinking a lot about ballet and the etiquettes and the rules, because partially in that as well, ballet has a very specific way of saying that there's only one way to do it. And so I'm, in my work, challenging that critique, the body type, the racialized, the gendered body. And so I always think about my work as queer ballets, I'm always trying to challenge who can do it, how can we do it? And I also then really think a lot about labor, the fortitude, the action that we take, is trained in our bodies, it's learned in our bodies, and it's not just an easy act. And I think sometimes there's this idea that dance is, easy, and we dehumanize the body, especially when we watch it on stage. We're not seeing the body, like sweat, or you don't hear cracks in the body, you don't hear the body breathe, you just see the body acting out in these ways. And so I really push that. And, one way I do that is by bringing my dancers off the stage. None of my performances are ever on stage. And the proximity between you and my dancers are very close, and there's a certain weirdness where there's a tension there between audience and the dancers. The dancers get used to it, but the audience, scurries away, but you can see and the body in action. So I really push the labor. Another way is that I also make my dancers take on really intense tasks, and endurance becomes a big part of it. So the time that they do it is for endured appearances. And so I'm really thinking a lot about that. But then I also think about the idea of dance. How is dance political? So I think about it through the breaking down of hegemonies. That one way is that I make comparisons between ballet as a Western civilized, quote unquote, form of dance. Ballet began as a way to bow to Louis XIV in his court, and eventually it became a dance form that all the kings adopted. So different courts created their own versions of ballet, and what we know now is a version from the Russian court. And I'd make juxtapositions between that and, West African masquerade. The French also created museums as institutions and brought those objects, mask objects to Europe. But in that, every mask object came with a dance, and we took away those dances. So I have that kind of, the collision of those two kinds of spaces, so ballet and masquerade. And so I kind of think a lot about also the colonial history of dance, the hegemony of dance. But then I also think about dance as being protest. When I gather people and we dance together, there's a certain sense of solidarity. There's a certain sense of bringing bodies together to celebrate. So protest doesn't have to be, like a march on the street. There's different definitions of how we can protest. And a certain way that I think about it is through the dance club, the dance floor of the club, where people gather, which makes me think about the queer club, where people feel safe or unsafe. And so I'm really kind of pushing those ideas.
That's the place where the tragedy of the Pulse nightclub really comes to play in your work, and you've revisited that a number of times through a number of pieces. And I know it's close to your heart, and it's a place where you've been able to have a very strong political voice, both through still work and through dance performance. And can you share with us a little bit about that, how that's unfolded, how it plays out, where it's gone, how it comes back?
Yeah, and I think 2016, I was in Victoria doing a workshop with the ballerina Rachel Myers from Ballet BC, and I was just really thinking about the idea of falling. You never see a body, a dancer fall. If they do fall, it's an act of, like it's romanticized. It's this grand, like, dramatic gesture. But if you fall on the stage, it's like, oh my God, there's a mistake that happened. And so I was just really thinking about falling. And so we were rehearsing this idea of how to fall and not hurt yourself and then get up again. So for me, the standing up was the political gesture that I fall, but I get up again. How do I, that gesture to stand up is a powerful gesture. Like, we move on from that moment, which I think we can think about right now in this political uncertain time, that, we need to move forward. So I started to rehearse this, and then at the time, tragically, and something that really affected me was the Pulse Orlando massacre, which, in Orlando, Florida, 49 people, Latinx queers were killed. Many others were injured. And I started thinking about, the club for me, when I lived in New York for the last, 14 years before I moved to Chicago, was a place of freedom, a place of sanctuary. And I also have been thinking a lot about the dance floor, a physical dance floor on stage, but also one in a club, and how, as dancers, we question its resistance. How does that resistance of the floor penetrate into our bodies? And, sometimes I carry residue because I've danced on a hard floor. So my dancers, to find agency for themselves, we always question, what is the dance floor made out of? How is this floor going to affect us? So there's that sense of resistance, but also political resistance. And so I thought about, this in this tragic way, that 49 people fell to the ground and didn't get up. So I started to think a lot about the falls that I was rehearsing and creating. And I created a piece called Free Fall 49, which debuted at the Gettys in, I think, 2017, where I worked with a DJ and I worked with a number of artists, all standing on platforms in the Getty Garden. And we invited people to come and dance. And it was a party. It was a dance party. And then we just started to dance, and the dancers on their platforms. But there was a sound cue that shut up, that came on, and when it came on, all the dancers fell to the ground, and the party stopped. And then slowly the music comes back up again, and then we start to dance again. But we did this for 3 hours for 49 falls, to commemorate, to memorialize, to acknowledge the violence, to acknowledge this act that happened, and this idea that the party stops is this interruption. And it's like, and the first time it happened, people just assumed that something happened to the DJ's booth and like the power went out, and then eventually and there was a count up, where we had each fall. So it would be like 1, 2, and eventually people started to acknowledge the sound, and then at the end, we had the whole group of people falling to the ground. And there was about 5,000 people at the event, and around 47, you heard the sound and everyone fell to the ground. And you would have 5,000 people all laying on the ground. And it's really visceral. It affects me. It affects everyone's body. But then eventually we all stand up. And then at the end of the 49, we all stand up and we just dance, and it becomes a dance party. And so that piece has had resonance for me, and it's kind of taken me on to think about violence, police violence in Canada, in America, and I've done a number of other pieces that have kind of resonated with this idea of safe space, being visible.
I think it's a great place to segue to some of the other work that you've done. I do want to pause on the Pulse nightclub for a second, because you've also found ways not only to create those performance pieces, but you've also used that same memorialization and repeated action, and created a film that uses the same kind of the bodies at rest, bodies falling. You've created a litho piece here at NASCAD with our master printer Jill Graham and Melanie Colosimo, who worked with you through all of that. I think that there's something incredible about coming back to that and paying homage and activating that kind of that moment again and again. There is no forgetting that for you. And you're adamant about bridging gaps between memory and future, which I really appreciate. And
Thank you.
looking at today, looking at the tension in our political systems and in this time of shutdown, it feels as though unrest is not an option. I mean, unrest is the new normal. That rest is not an option. So sure, some people, myself included, have been breaking bread or, you know, finding some solace in things. But we've also been really impressed with the ability to have voice and take on and take by the throat issues that have been simmering and long needed voice. So your ballet for, you know, you've made ballets for police cars, among others, and used authority and used those systems in a way that helps you to create a new body of work, create new ways of rising and almost taming some of those ideas.
Yeah, and I think when you said new ways of rising, like it makes me think about the idea of standing up again, and the idea of like, you know, finding a new way. I think a lot about, you know, what's happening right now in our world. We have to be politically, you know, aware, but also to imagine another day, a new tomorrow. So that's what comes to me from a very Marxist perspective, where I think a lot about imagine space, imagine futures. And that's why I think like even this idea of virtual space is like, hey, is this idea of like, you know, an imagined space, a space that we don't even know about, but how do we find that space? And so I've really been thinking a lot about that as well.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that piece in Toronto with the police cars, or because it feels very? I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
It wasn't done this year. Like you've been. This work has been building for you, and you've been finding ways of raising these issues for a while, and it seems to me like super prescient and important. And now is a time that we can talk about it and really have a sense of anxiety and urgency, and it's time is right.
And the thing is that, you know, one thing is that, you know, the time is right now, but those issues, those struggles, those civil rights that we're all searching for were, you know, they were still relevant back then. And I was thinking about that then, but now I'm glad that as a larger group, we can all collectively say, you know, we need change. And so the piece on flashing lights was a piece in Toronto for Nuit Blanche, where, you know, I was thinking a lot about police violence, police brutality, questioning, you know, ideas of, you know, prisons, but specifically in Toronto, in the past years leading towards, that was 2018, there was a lot of police violence and brutality to POC queers and indigenous people. And I always wonder, like, who's protecting my body? Who's taking care of my body? And that's even a way of thinking about in ballet. You know, who's protecting my body? Who's telling me my body is valuable? Who's telling me my body is not valuable? And so I started thinking about this, and so I came up with this idea to hire 25 cars and dress them with police sirens. So no sound, just the lights of the sirens. And then we created a DJ booth on the street, and the street was a street that faced City Hall. And we then created a dance party. So we had, I think, 6 to 8 POC queer DJs from Toronto who had identified that way. And we created a dance party, and people gathered. But for me, it was like, yes, it's a celebration, it's a gathering, but there's this moment of like urgency, emergency. Why are we dancing to the lights of police cars? So there's this sense of effect that something's not right, but we're still celebrating. And so there's this idea of like, you know, changing the space, challenging the space, you know, that the disco animation comes from police cars, you know, like that are circling around us, you know. And it was interesting because Toronto police knew about it. They weren't necessarily happy about the piece, but they just were always circling around the periphery of the party. And it kind of just added to the effect. And it was interesting because I had to like even be careful with the wording I chose of how I talked about this party, which, because it was like, you can't call it a party. So we had to be very careful. So it's a light and sound installation, because I think it became this thing. If people didn't want it to, they were nervous that it was going to be a party was going to cause a riot or cause some kind of thing. And so there was a lot of like, uncertainty, but it became this glorious like mass celebration.
Brendan, because you have agency as an artist to skirt some of those kind of political that language. So I love that a party wasn't allowed, but a sound piece and a light piece was allowed. So I just I think I'm always grateful to artists, because you give us all a chance to see things, and you often are looking at it ahead of the rest of us. So to be able to say, this is really important, we're gonna shine a light on this, like maybe a flashing light on this, and I'm gonna be able to tell it through this story. It sets the tone for many other people, and I know that you're also, living in the thick of it, straddling two worlds, living in America, and I also am aware that you're wearing a lot of coats right now, and wearing the weight of a lot of political desires, and being asked to represent a lot of different factions, a lot of different voices, bring your thoughts to bear. There was a great article that just came out in Freeze. A number of artists were asked to contribute. You were one of them, to a roundtable discussion around making art in this pandemic environment, which I thought really very honestly told about that challenge. Do you want to share a little bit about that with us as we have you, as we have you here in the so-called flesh?
Yes, in this virtual so-called flesh. I think for me, that roundtable that just came out last week in Freeze magazine was really important, because as I said early on in this conversation, like I was nervous when this happened, because I was like, can I make work? Can I still make work in the way that I do? And so I definitely have been thinking through. The time has given me the ability to think and be still, and to really process ideas. But it was definitely, that roundtable gave me a lot of option to talk and to question, because I don't have the answers. We don't know what things might even be tomorrow. And so being open, being honest, but also then really taking on this change and trying to move forward is also something that I've been really pushing through. So one of the things I'm working on right now is a fully formed dance piece, rehearsed, created, and then performed live on Zoom for the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto. And part of it is this making these virtual spaces, making these virtual spaces, filters that will allow the dancer to activate. And one of the things I'm really been thinking about as well is this idea of being visible. What does it mean to be invisible? And so the kind of power to kind of feel that I don't have to always say, like you said, I wear many coats, and I take those on and those roles and responsibilities. But sometimes I just don't want to be that. I just want to like move into the background. And so, and so I've been thinking of that as a space of beginnings for this piece at the Art Gallery of Ontario, which we're just starting to make. I'm making it with like 6 dancers. I'm reading my notes here, and we're gonna figure it out. And I'm like, I've never done this before, but for me, it's exciting. It's a new way to create a dance, a live performance. And I'm hoping that this will be something that will then carry on into my practice. So the challenges of finding anew also might find new ways of continuing as well. So like, even though we're in this time and we're like, yes, our new normal, and we want to go back to the old, I don't think we're going to go back. I think we have to adapt, and I think that shows resilience and resistance as well.
you are very mindful of your dancers and mindful of the role that they play for you and the responsibility that you have to them. What the conversation that we've had a number of times about the Whitney Biennial and about your responsibility to that commitment and how you can affect change within these institutions from the inside. I'm alluding to a moment where there were other artists who pulled their work out of the show for political reasons, and you opted to keep your dance piece in. And it feels to me, as we at the Art Gallery, of Nova Scotia, are wrestling with our role as a gallery, as a holder of objects, as a interpreter of stories, as a place where it's messy sometimes, and where people need to be able to push against this colonial kind of past. I wonder if you can just talk about how important it was for you to hold space in a museum for those dancers.
I think one of the things was to hold space for that amount of time, to create dialogue, to create, to have people see the work, created a voice for me, but also for the dancers. And so one of the things I really spoke out a lot about the biennial was that, I want to decolonize the space, but by decolonizing the space, for me, it does not mean to like dismantle the entire system. I think we talked about this in some of our earlier conversations. I've made this suggestion that instead of breaking down the museum, let's build new windows and walls and doorways to create new pathways. And so for me, my piece is a living piece. There's 20 dancers, a cast of 20, and it ran for almost 6 months. So that was their livelihood. And so I was like, if I remove myself from this piece, from this exhibition, the show, my dance performance won't be performed and they lose their livelihoods. And for me, responsibility, the care, the generosity, the collaboration is what my work's about. They give so much to me. They give me their bodies in such, intimate, but also laborious ways. It's for me, it's a huge responsibility to work with dancers. And so that was one of my main reasons for staying in the Whitney Biennial, but also to continue to make voice, to create change from within. That's a really important thing. And right now I'm really, anxious that, we're not performing. I don't have any performances, scheduled until 2021, and we don't know if that will even happen. So my dancers are without work, and there's something about that really distresses me. Like, everyone is being like positive and resilient, but the idea of even not dancing, I miss not being in a studio with them. I miss, so we're finding new ways, but we're also, there's still the kind of physicality of it all that is so needed.
Important time to reinvent, and I know for someone who's so used to being on the road and traveling as much as you do, Brendan, this is, I feel really confident and hopeful that if new ways can be found, if there is a way to engage dancers virtually, we were talking about Swan Lake in the bathtub, that there are dance troupes that are engaging audiences in different ways, and you are going to be one of those choreographers and one of those dancers who will find a way for us to still access your work. I am getting some very gentle coaxes and we may be coming to the end of our time together here. But I want to just invite you, if you have any final thoughts before we close that you'd like to share.
Well, I'm just so grateful again to you and the AGNS and everyone in Halifax. I missed you guys. I miss Canada. Right now, one of the challenges that I can't come into the country as easily, and my family's there. And so there's these moments of challenge, but I think through challenge, you build ways to move forward. And I really want to push that. And even that language to move forward is dance language. But let's take on the challenge and let's find new ways to exist and be. And, I'm looking forward to that and being positive to look ahead.
Every day, it warms my heart even more so to share a little bit of space with you this way. Thank you, Brendan. You will have seen on the screen images of Brendan's work, and please come to the gallery to see his work that is part of our new NASCAD Litho workshop. But he's also got a fantastic website, brendanfernandes.ca, where you can find all of the information about the work that we've been speaking about, as well as the many projects that are in the works for Brendan in the months to come. Thank you to our sponsors, TD Bank Group. Thank you to my team here at the gallery, especially to Laura Carmichael and to the incredible tech crew that's been working with us. And I hope we push on and relever and plier and get it done. Thank you all. Please join me next time.